When the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live-action movie was produced, it needed to be more kid-friendly, taking advantage of the cartoon's success. However, because of certain creative and legal limitations, two new characters needed to be introduced in the movie. But were these two new characters a stand-in for Bebop and Rocksteady? Today, I will explore the story of the original Tokka and Rahzar. As I was saying, the animated series heavily influenced the second Ninja Turtles movie. The studio wanted the sequel to have a lighter, sillier mood, and given the popularity of the toy line and the cartoon, it seemed like the right decision, despite the Turtles creator's suggestion of adapting the original comics. But there was one tiny legal problem. The two mutant enemies they wanted to introduce, Bebop and Rocksteady, weren't part of the source material. They were created for the toy line in the show, based on an original sketch by Peter Laird, but then worked on by John Handy and Errol McCarthy. On top of that, the characters didn't have a backstory or even names until David Wise came into the picture. And at the end of that creative process, Mark Taylor gave them their more recognizable characteristics. What I'm trying to say is that it was challenging to determine who owned what, and it was a much simpler solution to create two new mutants for the movie. This also pleased Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. The first movie adapted the comics, but with some elements from the toy line. So the sequel should have followed the same formula. They were also against the irreverent and silly take on the cartoon for live-action adaptations. But, well, let's say that their suggestion wasn't reflected in the final product. Rahzar was created by Kevin Eastman and played in the movie by 4 people. Mark Ginther and Hamilton Perkins were the in-suit performers. Gord Robertson was the facial assistant, and Frank Welker was his voice. According to this sketch from Kevin Eastman, Rahzar was almost an alligator snapping turtle with a mohawk, but in the end, he became a mutated gray wolf. Tokka, on the other hand, started his life with a different design. He's based on Terrorpin from Aqua X. He was created by Stephen Bissett and Steve Murphy for the toy line, and in the original sketch, he had a little companion named Snappy Warhol. I already talked about this character in my TMNT Volume 2 video, where he was used by Jim Lawson. Terrorpin was picked up to be adapted into The Secret of the Ooze. As a side note, Snappy Warhol was almost adapted into the 2012 show for its 4th season, but the writers decided to create Chompy instead. In the movie, Tokka was a mutated alligator snapping turtle, and he was played by Kurt Bryant and David Rowden as the in-suit performers, Rick Line as the facial assistant, and Frank Welker as his voice. Yes, Frank voiced both characters. You may recognize the Frank Welker name because he's a legendary actor who lent his voice to Megatron. But he would also stay with the TMNT franchise, returning as General Mono for the 2007 video game, Dr. Rockwell for the 2012 series, and one of the council heads from the Hidden City in the Rise show, along with other Transformers actors. Now, you may be wondering what I meant by facial assistant, or even why so many people were necessary to animate these characters. Well, the mutants were produced by Jim Henson's Creature Shop through animatronic puppetry. All the facial movements were done through puppets by radio waves. This resulted in an actor inside the suit, a puppeteer behind the cameras, and a voice actor in post-production. Now, let's dive into their origin story. The beginning of their creation originated at the TGRI plant, where Freddy, a mole for the Foot Clan in charge of following April, discovered a giant dandelion that was possibly caused by the chemical leak. Knowing this wasn't normal, he took this flower to his master, Shredder, who recognized that he could have his mutant warriors and defeat the turtles with access to whatever caused the mutation. At TGRI, Professor Jordan Perry was disposing of all the mutagenic ooze they accidentally created 15 years ago. Unfortunately, the Foot Clan kidnapped him and took the last canister in existence. Shredder asked for the 2 most vicious animals the clan could find, which apparently translates to an alligator snapping turtle and a gray wolf. He then tasked Professor Jordan with creating 2 mutant warriors. The professor knew this was a huge mistake, so he intentionally modified the experiment to make the duo less effective. After a few days, their cells could no longer hold them, so Shredder ordered to free them to meet their master. However, their first word wasn't master. It was mama. The Shredder was furious. the two most vicious creatures were babies. Correction, stupid babies. But according to the professor, there was a silver lining. They imprinted on the Shredder, which made him their surrogate mother. Shredder wasn't convinced and ordered their disposal. Worried for the baby mutants, the professor tried to convince Shredder that what they lacked in intellect, they compensated with brute force. Tokka and Rahzar debuted against the Turtles when they tried to free Raphael from the Foot Clan. They proved to be impressive opponents solely on brute force, and the Turtles had no option but to plan their escape. They freed the professor and escaped through the sewers. Tokka tried to follow them, but got stuck trying to get through a manhole. Knowing he was onto something with these mutants, he let them have some fun vandalizing a New York street.
Master, they have fun!
The following day, Freddy blew his cover to tell April to communicate a message to her friends to meet at a construction site that night. Otherwise, the next time they release Tokka and Rahzar, they will be in the middle of Central Park. Knowing that people would be in danger, Splinter realized they had no option but to be there. In the safety of the lair, Professor Jordan Perry figured out a solution to their problem by creating an anti-mutagen specifically made for the formula he used to mutate them. Unfortunately, the only way for it to work was by ingestion, so Mikey came up with the idea of making cubes and putting them inside of donuts. At the construction site, Shredder released the creatures, but the Turtles fooled them long enough to eat a donut each. Unfortunately, Rahzar discovered the cubes, and the situation escalated, with the fight moving into the Dockside Club. During the fight, they noticed Tokka and Rahzar burping often. Jordan realized they needed more carbon dioxide to make the process more effective, and all the burping was only slowing it down. After seeing some fire extinguishers, they switched strategies to make them swallow the carbon dioxide from these cylinders to the rhythm of ninja rap. On their way out to fight against the Shredder, the Turtles cross paths with Tokka and Rahzar again, now in their original form. Unless you're a toy manufacturer and need these characters to remain as mutants, which is what Playmates Toys did in the bio for both action figures. The action figure of Rahzar worked for the Foot Clan, and his main ability was his sense of smell, which could track the Turtles anywhere. Tokka, on the other hand, continued growing and causing chaos on the streets, but never in the sewers, as his spike body wouldn't allow him to get there. Tokka's sculpt was mostly reused from the Slash molds. At the time, the characters were unique to the movie, but quickly started showing up in other media. They were in the comic book adaptation by Steve Murphy and Jim Lawson, and later appeared in the Manhattan Project and Turtles in Time video games. They were also adapted into the '87 cartoon, so the version of the duo that appears in the Shredder's Revenge game is the one from the cartoon. These two characters were also adapted into the NECA movie line. They were made to order and had articulated mouths. Tokka even came with articulated eyebrows. There were more adaptations of these characters after their jump into the Fred Wolf cartoon. I'll make separate videos for those versions. Tokka and Rahzar have been fan favorites since their debut, despite the initial shock of not getting a live-action version of Bebop and Rocksteady. Tokka inspired the pseudonym for the talented artist Super Turtle fan, Tokka, also known as Dave. A long-awaited moment happened in 2021 when Tokka and Rahzar met face-to-face with Bebop and Rocksteady on the pages of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 115. But were Tokka and Rahzar a replacement for Bebop and Rocksteady anyway? The answer is no. Tokka and Rahzar were raised for chaos, but weren't inherently evil like Bebop and Rocksteady. This difference makes the two duos very different from each other. Also, Tokka and Rahzar have the intellect of the animals they were mutated from. Bebop and Rocksteady were already brain dead before their mutation, and they never improved. Ultimately, the four characters have their place in whatever continuity they find themselves. What do you think? Do you prefer one duo over the other? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.